Hello and welcome. What could extra troops in Afghanistan really achieve? Western powers are gearing up for a huge military surge, hoping to finally bring the conflict there to a resolution after 8 years of heavy casualties and continuing instability. President Obama's much-anticipated announcement promised another 30,000 American troops over the coming 18 months, almost a 50% increase in the U.S. military presence there, and adding to the 100,000 plus total allied forces already in Afghanistan. The US president is also asking NATO to contribute more, and at least 5,000 additional European troops are pledged. A big component of Obama's new strategy is a focus on the end game. He announced that Allied troops would begin to draw down from Afghanistan in mid-2011. Today we ask, will the new US and Allied strategy eventually bring peace to Afghanistan and enable Western powers to end their involvement more quickly? Remember, you can join our conversation with your questions and comments. You can send an SMS or an email. Well, joining me today to discuss these issues is the Secretary General of NATO, Fogh Rasmussen. He took up his latest position in August following almost 8 years as Prime Minister of Denmark, during which he was also President of the European Union in 2002. Mr. Secretary General, it's good to have you back, and I want to just kick off with the announcement, 30,000 more US troops, and I hope that America's allies will come forward to meet the recommended 40,000 that General McChrystal has requested. Are the skeptical leaders in Europe really on board? Have you spoken with them directly?
Yes, during the past weeks I have spoken with a big number of political leaders in the alliance, and based on this I'm confident that we will see additional troop contributions from quite a number of allies and partners. At least 5,000, and I expect a few thousands on top of that.
When you have a key player such as France willing to opt out, and Germany perhaps, I guess, in question a little bit, can you really meet that expected 40,000? And really, when it comes down to it, that 40,000 was the minimum, really, that General McChrystal was looking for.
Actually, both the German and the French government have issued quite positive statements in support of President Obama. They have also indicated that they might take a decision on concrete troop numbers at a later stage. I would expect some allies to wait until after the international conference, which will take place by the end of January. But for me, the timetable is less important. The most important thing is to see additional troop contributions, and I think we will see that during 2010.
And sir, of course, there's the issue of not just numbers, but how they're going to be used, how they'll be deployed. What is the main mission of these guys going out there? What really will they be used for effectively?
This search will build the bridge to a transition to Afghan lead. This is the purpose, that we can gradually hand over lead responsibility for the security to the Afghans themselves. And therefore we will train and educate Afghan soldiers and Afghan police so that they can take over responsibility province by province when conditions permit. We will stay as long as it takes to finish our job, but obviously that's not forever. Our mission in Afghanistan will end when the Afghans are capable to secure, defend and run the country themselves, and that's the purpose of this strategy.
And presumably that's before the drawdown in 2011, sir. And Al Jazeera has done an investigation. Our correspondent James Bays has reported on our air that there's been quite a clear shortfall in the real numbers of Afghan police and military, that the numbers quoted of 90,000 plus are really much lower, and that there's an issue of many deserting. So how are you going to guarantee that you can actually build the local forces to be able to become self-sufficient?
We will now strengthen efforts within training and education. So we have decided to establish a training mission in Afghanistan, and I urge all allies to contribute trainers, equipment and other resources for our training mission, so that we can get sure that we can really expand the number of Afghan soldiers and Afghan police, and also increase the quality of the Afghan security forces.
Now, sir, the U.S. public obviously has been very unhappy with the casualty level that they've seen among U.S. military forces. I wonder, with the casualty rate expected to increase with more troops out there, will the European public, will the U.S. public, the Allied public be able to, to stomach and accept the higher increased, the increased number of casualties?
Well, of course there is a risk. However, I do believe that people understand why we are in Afghanistan. We are there to defend ourselves against terrorism. We cannot allow Afghanistan once again to become a safe haven for terrorists. And I think people understand this is a reason why we are in Afghanistan. And they will also support our mission in Afghanistan if we can really show clear progress on the ground. And this is also the reason why it's so essential that we hand over responsibility to the Afghans themselves in a gradual process. And therefore, the training mission is crucial.
So how do you regard the view that it's the actual increase in troop numbers and the presence of the Allied forces in a place such as Afghanistan, and of course in Iraq, and obviously other issues as well, that fuels the animosity towards the US in particular, and actually doesn't help the situation?
Well, I think we will ensure support not only from the publics in the troop contributing countries, but also from the Afghan people when they see clearly that the purpose of all this is to hand over responsibility to the Afghan people, to the Afghan security forces, to the Afghan government. And a very important part of this is also to ensure better governance in Afghanistan, so that the Afghan people can really trust their own government.
To what extent does this surge of troops rule out the possibility of direct talks with the Taliban?
Well, I'm very much in favor of a reintegration and reconciliation process on the condition that it is Afghan-led. That is, that the Afghan government is in the driver's seat, and also, of course, on the condition that the groups and parties involved in this reintegration and reconciliation process will actually accept the Afghan constitution. But if these conditions are fulfilled, I think reintegration and reconciliation is the right way forward.
Well, President Obama talked in his speech about the end game, and we had an email that came in from a viewer in Pakistan. Asad Nir wrote in saying, what is the US and NATO's exit strategy? Will they ever achieve peace in Afghanistan through military means and by supporting a corrupt president in Afghanistan? I mean, how confident are you of a proper troop withdrawal in 2011? Was it wise to set a deadline?
Yeah, but it's not an exit date. What we're speaking about is a surge which will build the bridge to a transition to Afghan lead. We will, in a gradual process, ensure a stronger Afghan ownership, which I also think is essential for maintaining and increasing support of the Afghan people.
Then let me follow up, Mr. Secretary General, by quoting Senator John McCain, the Republican senator, during the US Senate hearings this morning, when he said, success is the real exit strategy. And an email from a viewer in California asked the following. Link Madison wrote in saying, what exactly are the criteria for declaring success and pulling all NATO combat troops from Afghanistan?
Yep, success is that the Afghans are capable to secure, defend and run the country themselves. So our mission in Afghanistan will end when these conditions are fulfilled. And this is the reason why it's so important to develop the capacity of the Afghan security forces. So we are not speaking about an exit strategy or an exit date. What we are speaking about is a transition to Afghan lead, a transition which, of course, will imply that Afghan security forces take on responsibility and the international forces can move into a more supporting role.
With more than 3 decades of conflict and chaos in Afghanistan, how can you be optimistic that it's not going to be a much, much longer mission?
Well, I'm optimistic because the decisions made this week mark a new phase in our operation in Afghanistan. We will now see a significant increase in the number of troops. We will see a determined transition to Afghan lead, and I feel confident that we can start that process already next year. We will see improved governance. President Karzai has committed himself to a strengthened fight against corruption and drug trade. And finally, we will also see an increase in funds provided for development assistance to Afghanistan. So all in all, we will see new momentum during 2010, and it creates optimism.
Well, Mr. Secretary General, I have more questions for you. We have to take a short break. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back. We're discussing the new U.S. military strategy for Afghanistan, just announced by President Obama, and asking how it will shape the future of that country and the involvement of Western powers in its affairs. With us to examine the core issues is the Secretary General of NATO, Fogh Rasmussen, who took up the position in August following almost 8 years as Prime Minister of Denmark. Mr. Secretary General, you actually were talking just before the break about the commitment by President Karzai to strengthen governance there and to root out corruption. Let me ask about the confidence you have in President Karzai, considering how the recent elections went. I mean, there's a general sense of more divisions among Afghan people.
Well, I take my point of departure in the inauguration speech delivered by President Karzai, a speech in which he committed himself strongly to a strengthened fight against corruption and drug trade. And I think he understands that it is essential for the future of Afghanistan that the Afghan people can really trust their own government. I also feel confident that the international conference, which will take place by the end of January, will constitute a framework for a renewal of the contract between the international community and the Afghan government. The international community will reconfirm its commitment to Afghanistan, and in exchange, the Afghan government will reconfirm its commitment to improved governance.
But of course, the difference between an inauguration speech and his track record are quite wide, and I wonder what incentives there are, whether coercion or pressure, to make sure he sticks by those promises.
Well, I do believe that President Karzai realizes how essential the support from the international community is. And of course, we have to convey a very clear message to the Afghan government. We will stay committed, but in exchange, we expect good governance from the Afghan government, because it's essential not only for the support from the Afghan people, but also in our endeavors to maintain a broad public support in troop contributing countries.
So we had an email that came in from a viewer through our Facebook page. His name is, her name is Pashtiana Koche, who says, "We need a strong and strict government ruled by Taliban. NATO and US Army are guarding the warlords, corrupt ministers, corrupt NGOs, and corrupt foreign nationals. That is the only purpose they serve." How will you win over people, and there seems to be quite a few, that have that kind of opinion?
Of course, it is a matter of concern if this is a widespread perception. And this is also the reason why we have to insist on improved governance. We are first and foremost in Afghanistan to defend ourselves against terrorism. But we have to realize that it's also essential for maintaining a broad public and political support of our presence in Afghanistan, that people do not perceive the Afghan government corrupt and inefficient. And we are ready to assist the Afghan government in the development of better capacity and improved governance. And I feel confident that President Karzai understands the importance of this.
Now, President Obama mentioned the Taliban only a couple of times in his speech and talked what seemed to be more about national security of the United States. To what extent does that send a message that NATO and the allies have been dragged into a mess that's been made by America and NATO is expected to basically cough up the resources now to deal with America's problem?
It's not only Americans' problem. It's not only the United States war. This is about security for all of us. If we left Afghanistan behind, if we allowed terrorism to get rooted once again in Afghanistan, then terrorists could easily spread from Afghanistan through Central Asia and further. Not to speak about the risk of destabilizing neighboring Pakistan, a nuclear power, which would be a very dangerous situation, not only in the region, but for the world as such. So this is not just an American challenge, an American problem. We are all in this, and I think all allies understand that.
Now, it's interesting, it was not long ago the Afghan defense minister said that the US surge in Iraq had simply forced extremists into to flee from there and go to Afghanistan, and there's a fear that many foreign fighters will, had started to show up there. Same thing will happen with Afghanistan, and I wonder to what degree Pakistan has been engaged to avoid basically a spillover of those who flee Afghanistan in the surge ending up in Pakistan.
Obviously, there is no solution to the problems in Afghanistan without engaging Pakistan. We commend the Pakistani government and the Pakistani military for their fight against terrorists in the border regions, and we stand ready to assist Pakistan if they so wish. And we have to look upon the region as a whole, and this is also part of our new strategy.
One thing is generally been discussed is that the US has been very unilateral in a lot of its actions, using the drones in Pakistan, for example, and a lot of its missions within Afghanistan itself. What sense is there now that with the US and President Obama calling on the allies for more support with the surge, that there will be more collaboration and cooperation? Senator McCain in the Senate hearings himself said there's no unified strategy with the allies. I wonder what effort there might be to create better collaboration.
Actually, it is a unified strategy. We have been through a very intense phase of consultation among allies, and today allies and partners have issued supportive statements in response to President Obama's speech. So this is really an alliance mission, and we should keep it that way.
What about the comments that have come from much of the top brass, the top leadership in the military in America, General Petraeus, for example, saying that Afghanistan was a downward spiral? What sense is there that the US top brass are on board with this fully? I
see a clear joint effort among all allies United States, of course, as the big troop contributor. Other allies will step up to the plate. According to the latest figures, at least 20 allies and partners will contribute additional troops to Afghanistan, and I expect more to come in the coming weeks.
Well, Mr. Secretary General, a quick final email, if I may, that came from Sweden, from Farid, who wrote in saying, do you think NATO can achieve success in a country that has defeated Alexander the Great, Great Britain and Soviet Russia? Can NATO become successful like in Kosovo and other missions so far? Or is your plan just to eliminate the Taliban and their alliances?
We will prevail. A lot is at stake, not only for the Afghan people, but for the international community. Our aim is to hand over responsibility to the Afghans themselves, and this is the way ahead. We need a stronger Afghan ownership. Therefore, we will train and educate Afghan soldiers and Afghan police. To build that bridge, we need more international troops in the short run, but in the long run, our goal is, of course, to let the Afghans run their own country themselves. We stand ready to assist as long as it is necessary. We will stay committed until we have finished our job.
Mr. Secretary General, thank you very much for your time. It was good to have you on the show.
You're welcome.
Thank you for being with us. Al Jazeera will be covering this story extensively throughout the day. Don't forget you can get further news and analysis by going to our website, english.aljazeera.net. Watch out for our correspondents' blogs from the ground on the latest developments. On the next show, we look at the challenges currently facing Saudi Arabia, including the crisis with Yemen's Houthi rebels and how that may affect the kingdom. Be sure to tune in for that. From me and the team, we'll see you next time.